Welcome to Steve. Today I'm sitting down with another Steven and the creator of Noise Engineering, and we're going to get to hear about how the company was born and created and what they're up to now and where it's going in the future. So let's go check it out. Let's go! Thanks for letting me come by and invade your space station. Did you play music growing up, or what was like your start into this musical creative realm?
Yes. So my, first introduction to music was piano lessons. Did 2 years of Suzuki and then ended up taking lessons from just another piano teacher until late elementary school, where I started playing in the orchestra and I was playing bass. And that was until high school. And then in high school, I actually changed high school to a high school that didn't have an orchestra. But then I started playing electric bass and harmonica and more keyboards. So at that time I got interested in synths, but I couldn't afford them. But I had some stuff I had gotten for cheap at some horrible music store. It's a little organ. I know that was kind of my early introduction to music was, piano lessons and sort of orchestral stuff. So.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Arkansas in a town called Fayetteville, and then later I went to high school in Hot Springs.
What was it like growing up in that town?
It's a beautiful area. I did a lot of outdoorsy stuff, and it's pretty small. Where I grew up is kind of odd because it is pretty rural, but then at the same time, like the Walmart headquarters is in that area, and like Tyson is another huge industry. So there's these very big companies that have, and there's university as well, where I grew up. So like it was an interesting mix of a lot of rural America combined with, not rural America, but it was definitely like not a city, compared to any, say Los Angeles, where we are now. Did
you play in any bands in high school and middle school?
Yeah, the orchestra was definitely my main musical time. It was all of my musical time while I was in it. When I changed high schools, like I wasn't really in a band, but I had a group of people we played just a bunch of random music with. We ended up playing live a couple times. It was like Beatles covers and blues.
So, and what instrument were you playing in that?
I was playing harmonica and guitar, actually, because my friend, who was kind of the other main compatriot in that, was also a bass player, and he didn't want to learn guitar, so I did.
And then what was your journey after high school?
So I was very interested in synthesizers. I had no money. Like our kind of notion of what a computer does for music is not the same as it was back then. I ended up I bought a kit, a Paya Fat Man, or it was a present actually that I put together. That was my first synth, and like I used Cakewalk 2.0. Like if you actually look up a picture of what the interface looks like, it will not remind you of a DAW. Like it literally had like a grid, and if a measure had notes in it, it would put a dot, and that was it. And there was like no superstructure. It was MIDI only, very rudimentary. And so like the next, 5 or 6 years, I started collecting little synthesizers. This puts us almost to the year 2000. And so like at some point I had a pretty decent MIDI studio. I had a Kai sampler and a DX7 and a handful, like a couple subtractive synths, and it was all MIDI. Like around that time was the first period of time where you could have a PC that would actually do audio recording, but it was rough. Like 4 channels would be really hard to do with the kind of hardware I had and the software.
But sometimes the best music or creative ideas, I feel like, flow within those extreme limitations.
Sure, constraint is absolutely key in being able to navigate, any sort of musical space. Like you need some structure to sort of hold on to, or even like a language to speak with about the music, whether that be an instrument or a MIDI or, recording audio. But like the medium is kind of important to making music.
What piqued your interest about the synthesizers, and kind of how did you first discover them?
Yeah, it was largely just the music I was listening to at the time.
I want to take a quick second to welcome you to the channel. My name's Steve. Welcome to Steve, and I'm excited you're on this journey together. If you want to see more, it's amazing if you hit subscribe, become part of the journey, because I want to hear what you have to say, and we can go on this journey together from the ground up. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get back to it. Let's go.
So like I was really into industrial music, like Skinny Puppy and Nine Inch Nails and Frontline Assembly, Front 242, all those bands. And so it like the gateway was that, like, just listening to the music, being like, I love these sounds, I want to be able to make these sounds.
And then how do you go from there to figuring out what those synthesizers are, or how to track down some?
I mean, particularly back then, there was no real internet. I had a synth friend. We'd read magazines, we'd talk to people. There's a lot more just talking to people. In some ways, I guess you look these days, people do it on a forum, but back then we would just find other people around that had gear and play with it and talk to them with it, talk to them about it. I mean, the biggest thing was just getting some and playing with it. Once you kind of understand a basic subtractive synth can do, like, you'll recognize that sound everywhere, right? Oh, okay, they're using that for that bass line here, right? That was definitely the biggest part of it, was just playing, getting our hands on it and playing with it.
So that takes us to the 2000s.
Yeah.
And then where do you go next?
I kind of got tired of owning a lot of gear around then. And this actually was right at the time when Reason was a Reason beta tester. And so, like, the world of software synthesis on computers was finally becoming more mature. And, going from like this hard one, every synth I had some sort of suffering to get it story, to like this virtual synth that, like, I could have 10 of whatever synth I wanted. Like, it was definitely a revelation. And it sounded great. Going back to a song in a studio with like 10 synthesizers, where you have to figure out what presets everything had. The last time you worked on it, like, the workflow could be slow and problematic. That really appealed to me, and because of that, I ended up really paring down my setup, and I ended up getting rid of everything but around 3 pieces of gear, the ones that were really honestly the most useful of what I had anyway. So
and what were those 3?
My Kai sampler,
Tried and true.
Yeah, tough to beat. I had a Roland XP50. It's one of the JV line workstations. So that was my main MIDI controller, and it's pretty epic. Like, there's a lot of classic sounds in that sound bank, and a really great actually platform for doing sound. I mean, preset design, I guess. It has a really flexible synthesis architecture on it. The Yamaha FS1R, which is like the most insane FM synth Yamaha ever made. And it's single rack mount. In some sense, it's a 16-op FM. It's an 8-op FM synth, kind of similar to the older DX stuff, but higher sample rate, higher sounding quality. And then there's an 8-voice formant synth also on it. It's one of the most ridiculous synths ever made. Like, each preset had 3,000 parameters. So it's kind of Menu Dive doesn't even start to describe the kind of interface for that thing, but it made so many crazy sounds, and it was such a deep interface for designing FM sounds.
So how did you start wanting to build synth modules? How did this whole company come to be?
Interest in actually how synths worked started back in high school. I was actually big into electronics at that point in time, and I was building, I built a television that used an oscilloscope as a screen. I built a bunch of crazy electronic stuff. Did a lot of vacuum tube repair, or vacuum tube radio repair. One of my outlets for wanting a synthesizer and not being able to afford one is to actually just read about how they work schematically, electronically. So I had the good luck. I had a advisor, mentor, something like that, who just had books, loaned me books. So like, I understood how a state variable filter, like the schematic for that when I was in high school, like a lot of the and just sort of the structure of basic electronics, and then these books that were loaned to me.
And at this point, could you look at a schematic and kind of understand what was going on?
To some degree, yeah. Not as much as now. My math skills weren't that great. My math skills have gotten a lot better, and math is really helpful to understanding that stuff. But yeah, to some degree, yeah, definitely. I mean, I would spend hours looking at effects pedal schematics, and that. A little bit later than high school, the internet appeared, and the second the internet appeared and there was the web, everything changed. You could just go and be like, hey, I want to look at the schematic for this Boss distortion pedal or whatever, and you could get on there and find it. I mean, honestly, I really enjoy looking at the schematics of audio effects. And it's, you can read it and you can understand their design choices. And I read a effects schematic kind of like someone might read a short story, right? It is actually just a really entertaining thing to break one of those schematics apart and try to understand what they were trying to do. So I actually got rid of almost all my studio gear. And ended up moving to a place, and a friend and I, it was mostly my friend, he had a nice electronic music production studio in the place we moved into. He actually had a half Dover half analog system, Eurorack setup. Actually bigger than this. It was a pretty big setup, though it was all the kind of first generation Eurorack stuff. So that was actually my first introduction to Eurorack, was through Jeff's system. I had dropped out of college. I'd gone back to college. I ended up getting a math degree because it's hard and I needed something to challenge me because I can't deal with going to classes that are boring. So after that, I kind of decided to move on from my situation in Arkansas, and I ended up going to school for video games, which is another interest of mine. And anyone who's from the video game industry, it's a pretty all-consuming industry. So then for the next pretty much decade of my life, I made very little music because it was just what I went to school for 2 years, and that was absolutely every second of every day in the program I was in. And then I moved to Los Angeles and got a job here. I do have one music credit on the second game I worked in out here as well.
Amazing. What game was that?
Call of Duty World at War. I helped the sound director, and I did a taiko drum kind of techno piece for one of the levels. And so we had a composer who did most of the music, but then he wanted to do something really different than what the composer's strengths were. So we sat down and did that together. Yeah.
He said, I know just the guy.
Yeah. I would write parts and loops in Reason and render them and then give those to him, and then he'd structure them so that they'd work for the game, basically. So I had a friend who was my neighbor in my office, Sean Jimerson, who actually ended up working for us for a while. At once noise engineering was a thing. And he was a sound designer. And after one of the games we worked on, he ended up buying a small modular system. This is around 2014. In this era of modular, it's kind of a renaissance. There's a whole lot of this is when Make Noise is really coming up, and Mutable, and a lot of the newer brands after the Dofer and analog systems. And there's a whole lot of really interesting ideas and cool ideas in these modules. And so, of course, I kind of glommed on to playing with it in his office. And as I learned it more about the particular modules, I started critiquing them. And then my friend got annoyed is a strong word, but he basically was like, if you know so much about these modules and what they're supposed to be like, then you should make me a module. And he had a particular ask. He wanted a module that could make the sounds of the Atari 2600, but tunable using the 1 volt per octave Eurorack tuning system. Interestingly, the Atari 2600 doesn't actually tune to normal musical scales. That's a whole kind of other diversion.
Oh, interesting. It's not in a normal 40 chromatic 12 notes per octave.
Nope. All the pitches come from divisors of the video clock. You can almost get there's one almost diatonic scale, but the pitches that you can program, no one designed them to make sense musically. It was just what was convenient in the hardware.
Was every C sharp tuned exactly the same, or depends on what scale you were?
No, it's not even like that. It's like you can play a note at 263 hertz. You can play a note at 322. Like, you just have kind of random pitches that.
It was more driven by math and the architecture.
Exactly. Yeah. There were certain integer divisors of the video clock. Were the only pitches you could create.
So if you were to start lower in the octave and then work your way up through the pitches that you had in this, you said it's the Atari?
Yeah, the 2600.
Yeah. Would it drift slowly sharper or flatter, or would it kind of be, this note?
It's just random.
Up octaves, it would basically still be the same because mathematically they would be connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like random.
Okay, there's no rhyme or reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, like there's one set of notes where you can get something that's very close to a diatonic scale, and that might have been sort of intentional. Like, it was not made to make music. Like, the sound system for it was like made to make a whole bunch of crazy sounds with very, very little hardware. Like, everything about the 2600 is this thing barely works to do what it did. I mean, even the video stuff's insane. Like, the programmers literally had to write code to generate the pixels just like slightly ahead of where the beam of the CRT would have been. Like, there was no frame buffer, there's no anything. It was, they actually in real time had to generate the pixels and stream them out as the CRT would be displaying on the screen. It's a really bizarre piece of technology.
Okay, so you figured out, how did you reverse engineer that to be in the module?
Synthesis technique is called a linear feedback shift register, and it's kind of a known bit of math. It's a pretty interesting bit of math. You actually largely use them to generate random sequences. So a lot of random, like, white noise generators would use something similar. But if you make really small shift registers out of them, you make these really kind of crazy sounding tones, which is what the Atari 2600 did. Interestingly, they're maximally, they have like a maximal spectra for their complexity. They produce Galois, what are called Galois sequences. So like I was already familiar with kind of like the mechanics of the math of the sound. And computationally, those are really, really easy to compute. It's a couple lines of code.
For someone like you.
Yeah, right. Well, for an engineer, yeah. And that correlates to how simple it was, like why they used it in the Atari 2600. Like, it's a sound that actually has a broad spectrum. It's like an entertaining sound to listen to, and you can generate it with very little programmatic complexity. So that's like why it was in the 2600, but then it was also why it's kind of easy to replicate.
You build this module for your friend, and does this kind of become the first module and kind of spark the idea?
I built a little half-baked prototype that actually the weekend after he wanted me to. Brought it in. We played around with that. I had, like a couple years earlier, I'd actually gotten back into making circuits. So I had built a lot of circuit stuff in high school, but then had gotten out of it just because I'd gotten into software, really. That was what my day jobs had been, even working through college. I was writing software. I'd already kind of started learning kind of like, I'd never made a PCB before, but I had actually, even before this had happened, I'd started making PCBs for some of the other stuff I'd been working on. And so it was just kind of a natural step forward to then go from the prototype I made for him, which was just a bunch of stuff literally super glued and soldered together that didn't really even fit in the Eurorack case, to the first couple prototypes. I showed it to enough people that were interested, and I got a commitment from Analog Haven, which is particularly at that time was the dominant place to buy modular in the United States. That Sean Cleary would commit to buying 50 of them if I manufactured them. So that commitment put my qualms aside, and I built that first one was 150 of them actually, and they sold out pretty quick. So that was like the first one. I wasn't really sure where this was going to go. It seemed very possible that I built 150 and I'd sell 100 and then have 50 left, and that was going to be the end of it. But there was a really receptive audience, which is the Eurorack sort of community as a whole is really receptive to new and fun and interesting ideas. And, a nice little quirky oscillator, it did well. So
The 150 is a success. Do you start having new ideas for modules or?
Oh yeah. Even by the time that first run happened, I had, probably 30 paper designs and a whole bunch of stuff in CAD.
You've been thinking about this for a while and kind of jotting down ideas. And
yeah, and just, and talking to my friend Sean about modular stuff all the time. And I had thrown, even before that first module that we built and sold came out, I had other prototypes that were working that we were playing with that became the next few modules that got released. So
just a couple modules.
Just a couple, yeah. It's kind of crazy when I look back at that.
Were you still working at the video cadence company at this time? Okay.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, this was definitely sort of a creative side outlet.
So you'd come home from work, from your full-time job, and then you start on your other full-time job.
Yeah, there's some of that, definitely. I actually kind of, a lot of the idea time was, like at that point in time, I was commuting from Pasadena to Santa Monica, so I had a lot of time to think. So, in the mornings I'd work on schematics, and then the weekends and, various free time. Particularly at that point in time, I didn't, it was my fun. It wasn't at all like a job because it was just like sort of just entirely creative thinking and then turning that into something real.
So how did it start to ramp up into more orders, and kind of how did you scale up from where that was?
The early period was just me when I could releasing stuff. At that point in time, I had a contract manufacturer that was kind of managing a lot of the inventory side of stuff. So I would just get a design done and ship it to them, and eventually it would come out, and it was doing okay. And it wasn't a full-time kind of job at that point. Around hitting a decade in video games is kind of when I was just kind of like, I'm kind of done with this. It's been a good ride, but I want to do something else. And so I had this on the side that I wasn't making serious money, but it was like there was the potential for it to be a career. And at that point in time, my wife Chris was also looking for jobs. She kind of realized that she wasn't really interested in pursuing any of the jobs that she was able to get. We decided to basically both quit our jobs and do noise engineering full time. We made some spreadsheets. Kind of was like, well, this looks like it'll probably work. We bought a house and both quit our jobs within a month. Chris ended up having a little bit of part-time work after that, but and that first year was pretty insane because definitely we blew up our lives.
Who were the big Eurorack players at this point in time? Were there a lot? Some boutiques, kind of, because I know now there's a lot of different companies, but at that time, what was the market like?
I mean, McNoise, Dofer, still going strong, IntelliGel and Tip Top, Erica. So all of those companies were big and around that time. We were actually kind of a little late to the game. One of the probably most interesting things about the Eurorack market is just the sheer number of brands. With like a lot of products, maybe you would have, 5 or 6 sort of players that are like really making like high-end, say, analog synthesizers. And that's actually gone up as well. Like in the last couple decades, the barrier to entry for manufacture of electronics has gone down. The wealth of knowledge available online is huge. So there's just this whole just massive ecosystem of small companies. A lot of them are, it's a hobby like it was for me at the start. And they might only ever make one module. I feel like there was just this explosion of little brands. And a lot of the little brands are cool. There's a ton of crazy one-off modules out there that have some really interesting idea in them. So, the market is very complicated. That is what it's like. And none of the big players dominate either. Like it really is, and it's also not, at least the non-Behringer part of the market is not competitive. Like I know a lot of the other company owners. We're friendly. There's not a...
It's a healthy community.
It's a healthy community. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of respect and co-respect. It is actually pretty healthy versus, a lot of other industries I've seen.
How'd you all scale up and kind of where it is today?
So we ended up hiring a few people. Our first employee is Marcus, who we met because they're interested in testing, and that was just testing. Testing is such an underappreciated skill and thing. Like, and a really good tester is absolutely invaluable, and Marcus is that. We had met Marcus just through events, basically Perfect Circuit, and they came here because they had a module to fix that was broken. We hired Patrick O'Brien. He was a long-time contractor. He did our videos for a long time, and now he's kind of manages all things video and social media for us. And we ended up changing manufacturers, which ended up definitely helping us scale up. That's really complicated. The relationship between us and our contract manufacturer is they enable us to be in business. And building stuff is very hard. So there's been a tremendous amount of learning and growth on all sides of that relationship. And then the pandemic happened.
And everything changed.
And everything got so crazy. Sales were great because everybody was stuck at home. So a ton of new people got into Eurorack. More people got more into Eurorack.
Did you all ramp up your social media presence or online presence at that point? Or
there was no ramp up period, I don't think. I mean, sales ramped up. There was basically a labor shortage because our contract manufacturer couldn't have. There were all the quarantine issues basically, so they couldn't have as many workers working. So we ended up redesigning pretty much all of our hardware to make it be more automated, to be more automatable in its assembly. Then the part shortage happened because everyone was buying more stuff, so then all the parts got scarce, and then we redesigned almost everything, not quite as much as the first redesign, but a majority of the modules ended up having to get redesigned again to work around different part shortages, stuff like that. Insanely, we actually were, and this is mostly just our contract manufacturer, they were able to keep almost everything we had in stock for the majority of the, say, 2-3 year period where the shortage is really happening. Wow. That was a big peak, and we're kind of now I feel like we're still kind of bottoming out, coming up from the kind of shock of the giant peak that was that period. Definitely after the peak started coming down, we started seeing a tremendous amount of stuff. People who bought it during the pandemic were selling it used. Obviously, used sales prevent new sales, so we've been in kind of this contraction period. Also during that period, we put out our plugins. We have 7 plugins, 10 plugins. I don't even know. I have to count them. So that happened during the pandemic as well, or in that time period. It's been a crazy ride. And last year we put out guitar pedals, which is another thing we've been wanting to do forever.
Now you're talking about guitar pedals. That's actually how we first met. So I love going to the NAMM show. It's total cacophony, but there is an area that has few tables, a couple boutique pedal builders that kind of showcase some of their stuff. And I always love to go there because you never know what you're going to find. So I brought my saxophone, my cable, I'm plugging into some pedals. I can see you guys looking over at me. I see you at the corner. I'm like, okay, I'll eventually get there. I show up. I'm like, is it cool if I plug my saxophone into your pedals? And you guys are like, yes, we've been waiting for you to do this. I was like, well, I've been waiting to do this too. So I plugged it in, and the first one was the Dystorpia. And I feel like most fuzz and distortion pedals with saxophone all kind of do a similar thing, but this was different. It had the clarity of the tone, but it had such tonal variance, and the octave up and below function that was kind of built into the architecture of it was very inspiring, and I had not experienced that in a pedal before. And then you also had the bat verb that was kind of about to be released. It sounded equally amazing with the reverb and the shimmer and the duck shimmer, which I didn't know that was a thing, and the infinite sustain, and that was stereo in and out. It was all really clear, but very complex and very well thought out, and you could tell that this is coming from someone who's probably not building pedals to begin with, and so it made sense that you are coming from the noise engineering, the whole Eurorack world, and you being an engineer, and that's kind of how your brain works. Yeah, so that's how we got introduced to each other. through this pedal. So how did you kind of make the transition or want to move to also making guitar pedals?
I mean, I've pretty much always wanted to make guitar pedals. I mean, I even, in high school, I'd actually built some just for fun.
What were those, or what did those do?
I was even then obsessed with octave fuzzes, honestly. I mean, I definitely shared some signal processing elements with the Dystorpia.
That's kind of a full circle moment. It comes back around. Yeah.
It had been something I kind of always wanted to do, but it hadn't made sense to do it until more recently. And then we wanted to, early on, the modules were kind of like, hey, this is a cool idea. I'm going to throw it in here and build it and sell it. Right? And there was not a lot of tests. There was not a lot of design even. And definitely not necessarily a lot of polish. And so we wanted to actually really spend enough time on the pedals to really make it something special and not just like oh, that's cool. And so like both Dystorpia and Reverb took a long time to develop. With the hardware, just guitar pedal signals electric guitar signals are just tricky. It's really easy to have something really minor have a noticeable negative effect on the signal, I guess. And so the hardware was hard. We're also pushing pretty high-end DSP and very small enclosures. So then we have all these digital noise is kind of the big enemy. So it took a long time to really nail that down. And then the software was like Dystorpia. The kind of first thing we did was try using, we have a module called Arena and a plugin. It's based off the same kind of distortions, and it was really cool. But it was the kind of failings of that with guitar was the sort of first steps into really understanding the subtleties of particularly guitar signals. But I mean, honestly, any physical instrument is going to have a similar, much more complicated dynamic profile. Like Eurorack is not known for its dynamics. You're often just generally taking peak-to-peak waveforms and then effects processing them and, maybe putting it through an envelope, and that is the only dynamics you're going to have is some fixed envelope. That's kind of a normal Eurorack flow. And so getting back into an actual physical instrument and the more complicated dynamics, and also just silly stuff like guitars are polyphonic, and you generally are using them in some polyphonic way even. And there's a whole lot of sound or effects that work really well on polyphony, but not that are boring on monophonic signals or vice versa.
Got it. And so in the Eurorack world, you're dealing more times than not with a monophonic signal.
Absolutely.
You can set up a polyphony, but it's more complex because you need a module for each of those voices.
Yep, or a module that does 4 things at once or something, which those exist, but they're not. I mean, they're more common actually in the last couple of years, but that's not the kind of mainstay of Eurorack at all. It's I have one monophonic synth voice that I'm doing something with, that is the general kind of bass flow.
But it's different on a guitar or a polyphonic instrument.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's rare you don't use more than one string at once if you're playing guitar for a couple minutes. Like you're going to have at least a fifth or something in there. Just all of those details really caused us to kind of step back and really rethink a lot of stuff and really redesign our effects entirely from scratch to make sense in that world. None of our pedals actually share core DSP code with any of our modules yet. Actually, interestingly enough, our pedal stuff we learned doing pedals, we're actually starting to pull some of that back into Eurorack. Anytime you think about sound in a different context, you learn something new about sound, and then you can apply that back in the other context you learn. So it's the same as it was true with plugins. Like working on the plugins definitely taught me more about stuff that's applicable to Eurorack, honestly. Like just different perspectives are always useful.
How many different modules or designs would you say you put out a year or in general?
It's highly variable. Our peak was 15, which was stupid. It was way too much.
How does that inspiration come to create something next in the queue?
Yeah, so these days, once a year, we actually have all of our employees in town for a couple days. It somehow got named Synth Daddy. And during that time, basically everyone pitches things they're interested in, new designs, and we just talk it through. We make a a very inaccurate schedule. We generally just try to do a schedule for 2 years and kind of get a flow of the things we want to release. And that discussion includes what hardware we already have that maybe half developed, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of just all get together and just hash out what we think the next 2 years should look like. And then we try to execute that. It never quite goes to plan. Sometimes just take a left turn halfway through the year because we realize that, we shouldn't do what we did, or there is an opportunity that we see in the market that we should really get this module that was supposed to come out next year down this year, stuff like that. But, it's just essentially an evolving, we have our plan, and then we just, all four of us just talk about it, what's going on, what we think we should change. So it's a very much a consensus at this point.
That's awesome. It's kind of like a family where you all come together and kind of share ideas.
Yeah, it's very familial. Yeah.
Thanks so much for, chatting. It's really cool to hear your story. Where can people check out your products? If they want to get into Eurorack, plugins, pedals, where do they go?
Absolutely. We have a website, noiseengineering.us. I'm sure you can just search for Noise Engineering and you'll find us. We are on Instagram at noiseeng, E-N-G. We're on all of the social media platforms if you just search for us. Thanks for coming over.
Yeah, thanks, man.